Hey friends, it's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon. Well, it's that time again. Time to make a sacrifice to the YouTube gods. That's right, it's a new Switch video. Lately, I've been trying to play more non-AAA games. For one, they're usually cheaper, and for another, it's fun to stumble upon gems that you didn't expect to find. With that in mind, I want to talk about 5 JRPG hidden gems on the Switch. Maybe you've heard of these, but even if you have, let me tell you a bit about them so you can decide if they're ones you might want to seek out. But before we dive in, would you mind hitting the like button? I guess it helps with the YouTube algorithm or something. And if you like JRPGs, would you mind subscribing too? And remember, every time you click the notification bell, an angel gets its wings. Thanks so much. Anyway, we're talking about Switch JRPG hidden gems. On to the games. Ara Fell caught my attention right away with its pretty high-quality pixel graphics and its whole promise of classic JRPG gameplay. Then I saw it was for PC and I peaced out. But then I saw an enhanced edition was coming out for all the major consoles, so I was back in. I grabbed a copy of the Switch cart from Limited Run Games. Of course, since I bought it at Limited Run Games, it was like a year before I had the thing in hand. By then, the temperature of my excitement had cooled a bit. I put it aside, kept plowing through my backlog, but then I mentioned it in a video I made recently and a bunch of you told me I really needed to play it. And so I did. And man, I can't believe I put it off so long. This game would have blown me away as a teenager in terms of graphics, story, music. I would have been bummed at the length because you can probably do a pretty thorough playthrough in about a dozen hours, but grown-up Brandon is more than fine with that, so honestly the short length does it favors in my book. This is a gorgeous trip down memory lane, being the first retro-style indie JRPG I've played since Undertale, which I'm fairly sure was the first I'd ever played. Battles start out relatively simple, but grow in complexity as you learn abilities, and the game begins to incorporate ultimate moves that utilize a meter that's shared between all members of the team. You gain strength by leveling up naturally, but the game actually employs crafting in order to improve your equipment. And this game has the honor of having the first ever crafting system that I've actively enjoyed. Items are plentiful, and the game makes you feel like you can get as powerful as you want, assuming you're willing to put in a bit of effort. It's extremely fun. There's also a story mode, and this doesn't remove the battles from the game, but it allows you to end them with the press of a button, giving you all the experience and money you would have normally received. This includes bosses, and yes, even the final boss. You can use this to breeze through the game and just enjoy the story, or you could even use it for grinding, and I promise no one will ever know. Speaking of the story, this is my favorite part of Ara Fell. The writing is so good. Not just the overall plot, which is excellent, but the dialogue in particular just shines in this game. It's almost a bit jarring because it looks like a game that could have come out in the 90s, but it definitely doesn't read like one. Graphically, like I said, it's beautiful. I would say that maybe the environments are a little too busy with the little details that occasionally make it hard to figure out where you're going. And I'm not crazy about the character portraits that appear with dialogue boxes. Something about the style just didn't click with me. But it's impressive that not just major characters, but every NPC in the game has a unique character portrait. And there are a lot of them. If your tastes are at all like mine, then consider Ara Fell to have my highest recommendation. It's a fantastic blast from the past, and if you can't get a physical copy to put on your shelf, at least grab this digitally and give it a shot. The Longest 5 Minutes was a game that I had on my eShop wishlist for, I don't know, something like 4 years. Something about the simplistic 16-bit pixel art kicked me right in the nostalgia, and maybe wishlisting it was just a reflex because of that. That was back before I'd started collecting physical games too, and because it was just a digital wishlist on an ephemeral storefront, I kind of forgot about it. Though I would remember from time to time as it went on sale and Nintendo made sure to let me know. At the Midwest Gaming Classic this year, I found a physical copy at a vendor, the only one at the entire convention from what I could see, and I remembered that digital wishlist. And since I'm just as susceptible to the nostalgia kicking power of that pixel artwork today as I was back then, I went ahead and grabbed it. The premise is very interesting. The game begins at the final battle with the Demon King, but something happens and Flash, the main character, loses all of his memories. He doesn't know who he is, who his party members are, or why he's there fighting the Demon King at all. As a timer in the corner of the screen slowly ticks forward, Flash has to try and regain his memories before the Demon King kills everyone. And so the story is told through flashbacks, sometimes out of order, that show key moments of Flash's quest, from his humble beginnings in his tiny hometown, to his battling demons on the abandoned streets of a nearby kingdom, to his epic escape from a mysterious prison. I was initially afraid that the story would be too broken up, too fragmented to really stick. It's possible to get too clever in your storytelling and end up ruining the whole thing. Fortunately, that's not the case here. Each chapter is relatively short, usually encompassing a town and a side quest segment and a main dungeon. So the good parts of the story are condensed down into these smaller sections, meaning there's very little in the way of downtime for things to get dull. The gameplay is very standard old school JRPG. Battles themselves are similar to the original Lufia, which if you're under 100 years old will probably mean nothing to you. But for other oldies out there, or I guess if you're a younger person but you've spent some time on the B and C list Super Nintendo RPGs, good on you, then you know what I mean. Strictly turn-based, with no real battle screen to speak of, just a random encounter fading the scene and battle sprites dropped on top. You can have your party of 4 attack, use magic, defend, or try to run. Like I said, very standard. To be perfectly frank, the game is far, far too easy. I know, if you've watched my channel before, you probably can't believe I'm saying that. But I mean it, it's probably the least challenging RPG I've played, maybe ever. Each chapter is completely standalone, so while you technically can grind random battles to level up, it doesn't matter because you'll always be set to the appropriate level at the start of the next chapter. Also, any weapons or items you buy or any money you earn doesn't carry over with you into subsequent chapters. So grinding away to buy the best equipment is pointless, since it's all going to be gone when the next chapter starts. And anyway, even sticking with the equipment you start the chapter with, you won't have any trouble beating the boss. So if you're a hardcore difficulty lover, you're probably not going to find much to like here. Go ahead and skip to the next game on the list. It's fine, I understand. Go on. But if you're like me, and things like story and music and characters mean the most to you, then I recommend you stick around. It's amazing to me just how attached I grew to these characters, despite the short runtime of 8 hours or so. The localization is extremely well done, and each of the characters have incredibly fun and endearing personalities. The framing device, with the heroes engaged in the last battle and continually flashing back to the important moments along the way, ends up being compelling from beginning to end. The actual plot itself isn't particularly complex or deep. I mean, we're talking about an antagonist called the Demon King, so there isn't a lot of emotional nuance in the big picture story, but the moment-to-moment stories are fun and heartwarming, and by the end, genuinely moving. The game even manages to throw in some endgame twists that made the final payoff even more enjoyable for me. I'm sure you'll know by now whether or not this game is for you. I honestly wish I'd seen someone's video about this 4 years back when I first put this on my eShop wishlist. I think it would have convinced me to take this particular journey a long time ago. I did a full review of Omori back in March of this year, so if this piques your interest but you're still not fully sold, go and check that out for more encouragement. Omori is an Earthbound clone, but it's so much more than that too. At its core, Omori is an exploration of grief and guilt through the medium of video games. But at the same time, it avoids clobbering us with heavy-handedness by interspersing some of the wackiest and most zany characters and story moments you'll see in a game. Like so many great works of fiction, it's many things all at the same time. Omori, the titular character, is a little silent boy in a colorful world of magic and weird creatures, and all the while he's going on all sorts of adventures with his group of friends. But one day, his friend Basil goes missing, and so the friends all set out to find him. They fight goofy monsters like dust bunnies and mixtapes and sourdough bread, and they go to strange places like the Firefly Forest and the Orange Oasis and the Underwater Highway. It's very much the sort of silly stuff a little kid would make up in his imagination. Maybe you see what I'm getting at here. Omori, the real Omori, is a teenage boy named Sunny. He's a shut-in, and he hasn't gone outside in what seems to be years. One day, one of his old friends stops by, drawing Sunny out of hiding, and he's finally reunited with all of his old friends, the ones he's just been having imaginary adventures with. But it turns out that friend group has fallen apart since Sunny shut himself off from the world. The juxtaposition of the real world and the fantasy world is extremely stark. Reality is dull. It's all part-time jobs and bullies and trips to the grocery store. You can almost understand why Sunny would rather spend his time in Omori's world, where things are constantly interesting and there's no conflict between his friends. While I think the most compelling part of Omori is the storyline and the characters, I have to say the battle system is one of the best and most interesting I've seen in a long time. At first glance, it might not seem much different than Earthbound or any other 16-bit-ish RPG, but there are a lot more layers here than you'd think. Each of your character's portraits in the corners of the screen shows their current emotional state. There are basically 3 emotional states your characters can be in, or 6 really if you count each state's amped up version. They are happy, sad, and angry. These states work together in a sort of rock, paper, scissors way, where happy beats angry, angry beats sad, and sad beats happy. Not only do your characters have these emotional states, but the enemies do too. Good strategy involves using special abilities or items to inflict a particular emotional state on an enemy, and the corresponding better state on your allies, and using that advantage to crush them into dust. But, of course, most of the harder bosses will be doing the same thing to you, so there can be real challenge here as well. I'm obviously avoiding spoilers here beyond the basics that you sort of need to understand in order to get what the game is about, but let me just say this. This game definitely goes to some pretty dark places. Finding out the reason why Sonny has locked himself away from the world and why his friend group has fallen apart in reality is part of the central mystery of the game, and things get heavy. If you're emotionally able to experience a story that touches on those sorts of dark and heavy themes, then Omori gets my biggest endorsement. It's one of the best RPG experiences I've ever had. Period. I remember kind of making fun of Mary Skelter nightmares in a video quite some time ago. I think I found the super grimdark terminology funny. This is a game about blood maidens who use their blood abilities to fight evil monsters and try their best to avoid blood skelter, a state where they end up uncontrollably rampaging, killing friends and foes alike. On paper it sounds very dumb, but I was actually pleasantly surprised by the game itself. Turns out, it's pretty cool, actually. This is a dungeon crawler in the purest sense. Think first-person, tile-based movement, generating your map step by step as you make your way through a bunch of twisting corridors. I don't have a ton of dungeon crawler experience, so I can't say which elements are unique to Mary Skelter, if any, but there are some things I definitely appreciate about it. The auto map, for one. The last thing I want to do is draw a map as I play. That just ain't me. The game helpfully takes care of that for me. Also, there is autopilot, where you can set your group to automatically travel to any point you've been to previously. This isn't fast travel, battles can still occur while you're en route, but it makes the occasional necessary backtracking much easier. Each dungeon is themed in a different way. One is a waterfront, another is a cityscape, another is some sort of dormitory. The variety's nice, but you're not really there for the environments anyway. In this kind of game, it's all about story and gameplay. The story is interesting and fairly unique. At some point in the future, most of Japan disappears into a big hole. The hole is alive, I guess. It's aware of the things it swallowed, and it creates bizarre facsimiles of those things. The people that live in and near it call it the jail. A bunch of monsters live there, and they spend their days capturing and torturing humans. Our main character is Jack, the requisite male self-insert character you'll always find in these sorts of harem-type games. His best friend is Alice, and for some reason, when Alice gets worked up, drinking Jack's blood calms her down. At first I thought, vampires, but no, that's not what's going on here. Alice and Jack get sprung out of jail and are taken in by a resistance group. The frontline fighters are called blood maidens, and it turns out that, naturally, Alice is one of them. But Jack is special too. Even though he's not able to fight, his blood is unique. It has the ability to keep blood maidens from entering blood skelter, which essentially turns them feral and is otherwise incurable. This is where the gameplay and the story meet in what is a fairly fascinating way. Like I said, Jack can't fight, but he's there for every battle. While the blood maidens are fighting the bad guys with your usual array of special moves, Jack is responsible for managing them. On his turn, you'll be able to use your special blood gun that's hooked into you via IV to spray the girls with blood if they get too worked up. Now, if you're squeamish, this might have you reaching for the skip button, but let me assure you, there's basically no gore in this game. And because the storytelling is primarily visual novel style, you never actually see any of the gruesome sounding things your characters are doing. It's way more disgusting to describe than it is to experience. Your blood maidens level up as you would expect in any RPG, but there's more depth here than just leveling and gaining new skills. You can assign points to learn and upgrade special moves, of course, but you can also change each character's job. This not only changes their appearance, but it gives them access to different movesets and adjusts their base stats according to the type of job they're taking on. Not every girl has access to the same list of jobs as every other. There seem to be a handful of categories, and each girl can only take on a certain selection. This really encourages you to sort of mix it up. The gameplay is enjoyable, the story is entertaining, entertaining, the voice acting is solid. All in all, this one really surprised me. Definitely worth checking out if you're able. If you're not a gamer of a certain age, you may not fully see the appeal of Saturday morning RPG. Honestly, even though I decidedly am a gamer of a certain age, I avoided it for the longest time. For one, even though I hadn't played it, I got the sense that it was trying too hard, you know what I mean? Like, it was doing that whole wink wink, look, we're referencing that thing you like, wink wink, get it? We know about that thing too, wink 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 wink, wink. Which, I suppose to an extent, is accurate. But now that I've actually played Saturday Morning RPG, I can say that it's so much more than that. The story is not going to blow your mind, but then again, it's not really trying to. It emulates a classic 80s and 90s Saturday morning cartoon with over-the-top villains and absurdly righteous good guys, and it parodies some of the classics like G.I. Joe and Transformers. But while you shouldn't expect anything life-changing in the plot, it is pretty dang funny if I'm being honest. Your character, Marty, receives a magical Trapper Keeper in a dream, and he's able to cover it with powerful scratch and sniff stickers that improve his abilities in combat. He can equip himself with all sorts of era-appropriate items and use them in battle, from a replica of Michael Jackson's famous white glove to a Care Bear doll that shoots a rainbow out of its stomach. His school has been taken over by the in-game equivalent of Cobra of G.I. Joe fame, and that begins his quest to free the world from evil. So while the story is fun and funny, it's honestly not going to be the thing that keeps you coming back. For me, it's actually the gameplay that kept me engaged for a change. Battles are turn-based, like you would expect from a game called Saturday Morning RPG, but there are a bunch of time button presses that play a huge role in how battles turn out. Anything from timing a throw to hitting a button at the right time to appropriately charge up your batteries to increase your damage percentage. You're constantly engaged in the combat from the beginning to the end. Each battle starts off with the need to frantically scratch your scratch and sniff stickers on your Trapper Keeper in order to boost your stats. You do that by either moving the left stick or by rubbing the Switch screen with your finger. Honestly, I could do without that, as I kind of worry about potential long-term damage to my Switch control sticks, but whatever. From there, you choose your attack and your target, and battle is underway. You'll need to use time button presses to defend against enemy attacks as well, and your blocks can either be lame, good, radical, or righteous. Getting a bunch of righteous blocks in a row does make you feel pretty darn good, if I'm being honest. After each battle, you receive a grade based on how well and how quickly you took out your opponent, and a higher grade means more experience. The world you explore is super colorful, the characters you encounter are goofy, the dialogue is generally hilarious. If you didn't grow up in the 80s or 90s, it's a bit harder to recommend this game overall, but I do think the gameplay is fun enough that it's worth considering. If you've played this one, let me know your thoughts down below. And that's it! What did you think? Any other hidden gems you're aware of that I should check out? I'm always open for recommendations. After all, at least one of these in this list I only played because a bunch of you suggested it. Thanks so much for watching, for liking, for subscribing. I really appreciate it. Anyway, until next time, bye.